And then I'm gonna bang on this woman, because she's in town for something special, but she's also part of the National Task Force to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. Ruth is from Denver, but she chairs the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And you are part of the DC network, which is part of a larger network where I first met you, the National Network to End Domestic Violence. We need about 30 organizations to do the job, and we still have a lot to go. So I'm gonna, you do something, and if you think of something, these are my, I'm retired. So these are my troops. And I'll pop in with stories and suggestions for action.
Well, troops it is, because Pat does really sort of get you going, moving, direct, and everything. And so when you say the godmother of VAWA, she really did introduce and bring most of us along in your work. And so we are appreciative of your work and your leadership. The DC Coalition is the membership agency here in the district. We have 15 organizations, 4 of which provide housing services. The rest provide non-residential services ranging from legal services to assistance with education and prevention in schools, a wide range, and also some culturally specific organizations that specifically serve the African American community, the African community, the immigrant community, and the Asian Pacific Islander community. So our work really focuses on training and technical assistance. It focuses on policy work. And last year we launched a national arm that focuses on domestic violence in the Black community, and the name is UJIMA. And so UJIMA focuses on domestic violence in the Black community, and that includes African American, African immigrant, Afro-Latina, and African Caribbean. So our work really, as I'm inspired by advocates like Pat, like Ruth, like our friends at CWI, right. Like Dorian, and so many others, really does center around things like the stories that you hear in Me Too. Because what they encapsulate, what we see in DC, is that, you know, each one of us has a story, so true. And when we talk about domestic violence, sexual assault, sexual harassment, oftentimes people sort of shy away, right? And they don't believe, either they don't believe or they don't want to be associated with the victim. And what Me Too has done is said that this is something that impacts not just me as an individual, it impacts us all. And it's really given voice to a new generation of activists, many of whom are sort of new to these issues, but we've also then sort of reignited others who've been involved in these issues for such a long time.
And Ruth, when we heard about Me Too, which apparently is 4 or 5 or 6 years old, but when it exploded for various and tawdry reasons, didn't all of us in this room went, it's about time? We aren't on our third wave. We have Anita Hill. We have the tail hook. Remember when they lined the hallways and the Navy women were physically and don't make us name, starting from our own school days and work experience. But we were ashamed. And we thought it was our fault. Now I can't believe now as a feminist I'm saying that, but there was a time where we thought it was on how we dressed, what we drank, and if we just were nicer, they wouldn't be so mean to us. So suddenly there's a whole, and there's about a sprinkling of you here, there's a whole group of women and men who don't have those chains around them. And so they didn't have to you find the key to unlock them. They just stood up and went, me too. So give us a little sense of how how NCADV is responding to the Me Too.
We're responding by acknowledging that for many years the shame and humiliation that went with exactly what Pat described, being a woman trying to move in the world and trying to move in the world safely. And whether it's sexual assault or domestic violence, we know that moving in our world as a woman is a difficult thing and sometimes real unsafe. One of the other things that we're focusing on in relation to Me Too is reminding society that women are most often, or can be, not most often, but often in domestic violence situations, sexual assault is used as a tool. And when you're finally coming forward about your DV, we have discovered in our work that oftentimes survivors are not even talking about the sexual assault they endured in the DV situation. So we're encouraging that you also talk about that. If once you've decided that you're going to come forward, the Me Too allows them to move in that as well. So they've already revealed the DV, and now we're talking about the sexual assault that they've endured as part of that tool control.
Thank you. When I first saw the hashtag Me Too, because I am who I am, I wanted to ask that, add to it, hashtag what next? Because how many years have we sat around talking about the problem, wringing our hands? Jane would say, I'm at the Women's Bureau, I'm hatched, I can't be, I put a bag over my head to go to these meetings. That was in the bad old days. But the solutions weren't working. Go get a lawyer. Well, who has the money for a lawyer? Go to the EEOC. Well, that's a lot. Go to your boss. Yeah, right, he's the one. So, but with this new just explosion, and I read this morning that 2 California legislators, men, have suddenly wanted to resign to spend more time with their family. Now, and before we go to solutions, I want to make sure as feminists and that we believe the women, and we believe all women, not just the women who accuse the people who don't agree with our point of view. And that breaks our hearts, because those 2 California men were good Democrats and probably carried some of our legislation. But guess what? And that the accountability of seeing people lose their jobs or have to retire or get publicly humiliated, like women used to be with the Scarlet Letter, remember? I think that they all ought to have scarlet letters. Let's think by the time we leave here which letter we paint on them. Anyway, so let's, Karma, with all your years here, where can we sort of maybe begin to turn Me Too, exaggerate it and extrapolate it, and then a what next for us and our daughters and our granddaughters and our sons and our grandsons and our mayor and our governor. By the way, in Virginia, we elected 3 men. They're good men. 52% of their vote came from women. Not very good. 92% of the vote came from black women. Sisters, I'm in awe of you. Thank you. Black women believe other women much better, and nobody's the boss of them when they decide who to vote. So here we go.
Well, I mean, for me, Me Too is both personal and it's also about organizing right? And so really the work around Me Too begins in our homes, in empowering our daughters and empowering our sons to speak out. One of the important things that we learned, we do some work in schools, and we work with a number of football teams in local schools, and really work around shifting their perspective on sexual assault, on how they treat girls, etc. And so what they all told us is, in the classroom we get this. Amongst our peers in the school we get this. The challenge is, what do I do when I'm at a party? What do I do when I'm walking down the street and I see something happen? How do I respond from that perspective? How am I still going to be relevant and cool? How can I still be captain of the football team? How can I still do all of those things when I'm out of this safe space? And so what Me Too really does is it challenges all of us, not just those survivors and not just those victims who are speaking out, but it challenges all of us to empower the voices of individuals that are telling their stories, and also to empower the voices of those who are on the sidelines watching, to make sure that they then bring voice, right? And that they can speak out, so that when they are not in their safe space, they can challenge. So that's where I think it starts. Then certainly from a policy perspective and an organizing perspective in your local areas. Here in DC, the DC Human Rights Act is what sort of governs the response to sexual harassment, but training for employers is not mandatory. It's suggested, but it's not mandatory. So that's a piece. That's something that we can be working on in this next council legislative session, is to ensure that training is a mandatory perspective of the Human Rights Act. Right? And then certainly federally, as we gear up for the Violence Against Women Act, we will need voices. We will need you. And there are certain folks who are not supportive, especially right now. And so what we need is for us to sort of be out front in the same way that we are with Me Too, to say, with the Violence Against Women Act, certainly domestic violence, sexual assault, impacts everyone, but women are the most at risk. And so we've got to really talk about that and talk about what that means. We've got to be ready for the pushback because we know it's coming, right? And so we need all voices, all folks, everyone, from every ethnicity, from every socioeconomic status, from every age, to tell your stories and to really be active.
I think about, we have to wait till the movie stars and the TV stars speak out, and then that was the bad Pat Roos. Like, why do we have to wait for them? The good Pat Roos went, thank God they spoke up, because in a funny way, they give us the courage. If Uma Thurman can say it, well then so can I, the Sears clerk or whatever. The other thing we have, I'm not tired, but I'm worn out fighting to get money and programs and services after the fact, the deed, what are they, molestation or whatever they're accusing these men of. And so besides, I'll go to my death fighting for funds for VAWA, don't get me wrong. But what if we started doing stuff so that we could actually maybe give away a bed at the shelter, not buy 10 new ones? What if we could actually not have to have 20 emergency housing units because of the flood of battered women? And it's funny because Congress right now, here's something you can help with. I know a lot of you live in DC and don't have a vote, but if you have a sister who lives in Ohio, act as if you're her and write to the Ohio senator. That's okay. They're going to actually require members of Congress to have sexual harassment training. Now, that's a joke. They're going to go in, they're mostly men, they're going to go, all this PC, S-H-I-T. Oh, I would never do that, wink, wink. But I think we ought to, if we're at local levels, we ought to get our mayors and our school board. We ought to go to the biggest corporation in town and suggest respectfully. We ought to go, if we have a business school in our town teaching people to be managers, my God, what if they talked about one of the management things you have to know is to have a safe and a violence and discriminatory-free workplace. We went to doctors to get them to recognize violence in children and adults. in med school? What if we started going? What if we went to churches? Oh my God. What if we went to unions? Oh my God. What if we went places where there are high, what if we went to the local base, the military? Oh my God. What if we went to all the bases with hierarchical organizations where when you say, why did you do it? And because I could. The batterer, the beater, the molester, the harasser, the rapist didn't just wake up one morning and go, oh, I gotta go do this. This is something that helps them keep the power. You talking about power and control. And
so I agree. They're allowed to continue to do that because there's no accountability. It's one of the things I talk about all the time as NCADV.
I need to lean on the chair.
So we talk about that a lot, that they're allowed to maintain power because there's no accountability. Let's be honest about that. And what Pat is talking about is really, really important, and particularly now. I can probably say a lot more than Carmen might be able to. This environment that we're in right now is less than friendly to women. It is harmful to women. Yes.
Toxic.
Nuclear. Yeah. So I can say that, and I can say to you that we can't allow it to happen. And I think I want to go back to, let's strip that power away the best way we can, which is our storytelling. My thought is, let's flood them with letters about our Me Too stories. But not just Me Too. What are we going to do next? And going back to Pat's point is, letters matter. I've come to know that. They really matter a lot. Do whatever you can when you write a letter about what is next. Because if we don't stand up and make something happen, this is probably the most interesting and toxic, I like toxic, that'll be my word now, toxic time that we'll ever see. And if we don't change the tide by standing up and organizing around that, they will remain in power. And we will continue to have perpetrators who hurt our grandchildren and I worry so much about my 3 granddaughters. 3? I have so many of them, I lose count. I'm not kidding. My 3 granddaughters and what they're going to grow up with if we let this go. And I know it's hard. I mean, there are days that I think, oh my gosh, this is some alternative reality, not an alternative fact because it's real, but an alternative reality that we're living in, and how do we switch this to remove that power? So,
speaking of granddaughters, I bet we all have a bunch of them in this room, or are granddaughters, right? And guess what? If you're a granddaughter, go talk to your grandma about it. I sat with my sister, a corporate single woman in corporate America, and asked her about the Me Tooism, the harassment and the whatever in corporate America. And she actually, my beloved sister, for about the first 10 minutes refused to talk about it. So there's something real deep there. My granddaughter, maybe she's 10 now, maybe at 8, said, Henry hugged me, gave me hugs all day long. And so, because I'm me, I say, well, hugs are nice, but usually once is good, and the rest you have. And I did the safe touching, and I thought I did it with all of my great gifts of love and gentleness. And of course, my daughter-in-law calls and going, Isabella had nightmares all night long. Half of me apologized. The other half said, better that you have nightmares learning about safe touching than you have nightmares about bad touching. And so I was bad mother-in-law for a while until I kind of regained my power and said, well, somebody has to do it. So I know we talked about from nursery school to the retirement home. There's no escape. Not your age, not where you live, not your money, not your race, not your ethnicity or your sexual identity. And so, I want to support every program and everything that helps us as we survive, but I want to also work on reaching out, especially the communities like Native American communities, immigrant communities, and African American communities. These are the women who vote better than we do, the white privileged women. And thank God. Anyway, so give us some clue about how we can, if we're going to do some targeting and specialization where we empower those communities, because that's what I'm proud of you for the work you're doing.
So I think one of the things that's so important and so key is the voter mobilization. And the voter mobilization is happening in organizations like the Black Women's Roundtable and across the country and other organizations, because I cannot underscore enough what our sisters are talking about in terms of the power that people feel. And that entitled sort of, I have my job and nothing's going to happen to it, and until they are voted out and until they lose power, then we don't see a shift. And so the voter mobilization that's happening in communities is happening especially in communities of color, in immigrant communities where people are saying, let's get out, let's vote, let's unseat some folks so that we can shift power. And of course what that means is that brings about fear. And it brings about backlash. And that's what our communities are seeing now.
Yes.
Is increasing backlash. In name calling. Increased police presence. Folks being more criminalized. We're seeing lots of focus on immigrant communities. And so one of the things about empowerment is allowing for there to be space for folks to tell their story. It's also pushing back against stereotypes, pushing back against those things that really serve to denounce and disempower communities. That is so important and so critical. And we're seeing that in shelters. We're seeing that when battered women are showing up in the criminal justice system just trying to get a protection order, that they're no longer being believed, that they're losing their children at incredible rates. And so this backlash is very, very real. And I think it's one of the most important things you can do is raise voice, link arms, and say, yes, I believe her, and I walk every step with this community so that it's not something that's happening in solitude.
In my retirement, I'm an advisor to the now Political Action Committee. All those years of 501c3, I'm getting my revenge now. And I think of what you can do right here. If you live here, you vote in D.C., but you get your sister's name in Ohio, or you just call and say, I drove through Illinois once, and therefore that worked for me. I got a senator from Illinois to sign on something because I said I drove through Illinois, and he said, oh, Pat, that's good enough for me. You're here. Get your glass bottle of wine that you can have afterwards. Get some lists. Get your phones, your cell phones. And next year is going to be a bang up banner, oh my goodness gracious alive year. There are women running for governor and women running for mayor, and there are women of all ages and all diversities. There are feminist men. There are, and the way you get out the vote is you go knock on doors. Well, I'm passing on that. I have to hold on to a chair to stand up. Or you make the phone calls. And I know people don't like to get phone calls, but if you're cheery and talk fast, you can get through to them with saying, look, I live in D.C., I don't have a vote. You have a chance to re-elect Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. She's the rich people are out to undermine her and get her, and so I'm calling. Thanks for your vote. And then they hang up with you. Both my sister groups can't quite be that political, but I'm sure somebody here, I know there are people here that will work with either National Now or the Women's Camp, or the, oh dear, the Emily's, there are lists everywhere.
League of Women Voters.
The League of Women
Emerge
Voters.
America.
Pardon?
Emerge
Emerge. All right, now remember Emerge trains women, and the League of Women Voters is a C3. We're looking at groups that are truly vote for this person, send money to this person, and there are laws that restrict. But you as an individual, no longer at the Women's Bureau with the bag over your head, you can say, hi, I'm a volunteer for Jane Smith for Congress. She's got a shot, and I would like to talk to you about how important she is to kids, because I have 5 grandkids. And I live in D.C. and can't vote. I need you in Nebraska to support her. And that emotion they're not selling medical equipment, your credit card hasn't expired, you don't need any more magazines, or whatever, all the things we get the phone calls. All right, but Ruth, but there are other things they can do out there we can do, and I know NCADV has a couple we're working on to help empower women as they come to the shelters. Thank you.
Yeah. So a couple of other things is, along with the phone calls, I do encourage letters. We're hearing more and more that they just need to be inundated with those letters and telling the story, because that's what we talk about. We talk about the ability of anybody to tell their story now, and I think that that's just as impactful as some of the other things. The other thing is that the voter mobilization and the backlash that's happening in other communities is really, really critical. I'm going to go back to Pat's original question, which is, how do we make sure that those communities that are suffering that are empowered? And I say, get into them. I have a dear friend who said, I don't know what to do. And I said, you cross over that street and go talk to them. Listen, hear what's happening, so that you can be better informed when you do write the letter or make the phone call. And there are many, many ways to do that. One of the things that we're doing, just to let you know, is that we are developing more and more action alerts about how and who to call, and how and who is going to be important, particularly in the next year. Like I said before, we can be a little bit more political, so to speak.
Yes.
So for us, if you just sign up for our email list on our website, you'll get those action alerts. So and sometimes they're duplicative of NOW or other organizations, but sometimes they're not, and particularly around the deviant stalking issues that we address.
What is the website?
It is NCADV.
National Coalition Against Domestic Violence,
yes.
NC, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And wonderful.
Thank you.
What if every retirement home, what do we call our house? The
residence.
Residence. What if we all had blank pieces of paper, no names, and sat down and wrote our own Me Too? What if the retired teachers and the retired nurses, what if we pulled it out anonymously and wrote it down? So they don't just think it's the young girl who couldn't stand having her butt touched by a senator. That is the beginning of the control over somebody that can lead them to tragic lives. And so what if we did that? What if you guys did that over a glass of wine and just got a yellow sheet of paper?
Is there any legislation that
Congress,
state level, local legislation? What you were talking about,
we're working on
going
it.
and asking people if they would be trained. Is there any way?
Some people have it, but it's a joke. So I mean, part of our escalation has to be, if you're requiring training, it isn't just somebody reads something, you show up, sign your name, and then leave, which is most training. So there needs the group. We don't do that kind of, but the groups that can do, there are professional trainers, and we need to probably even rethink the training. And guess what? At the end of the training is, you might have thought this was a joke today, but guess what? See Joe Blow over there, the California U.S. state senator? He just quit. And you know why? And look at, and then start naming names. And Admiral this guy, and Preacher that guy, and the president of the math club. It isn't just athletes.
Right.
One more, wrap it up. And question, take some questions.
Pat, you inspired me today, just as you have been doing for 25 years, when you said money.
Oh!
In the old days, we had jars for when we cursed.
Oh, I know about $50.
You had to put a penny in, or a nickel in, or a quarter in. Well, suppose we had a jar on the floor of the Senate, and the floor of the House, and the floor of this residence, and the floor of every business, and we said, if you do anything that is offensive, you put $1 on it. It's inflation, you know? And make it visible, and make it financial. It's something.
And another thing, why don't we go after all these guys that have been accused of stuff and tell them, because some of them, they're not going to get prosecuted, that they need to donate money to women's organizations. to
They
compensate.
actually ought to wear sackcloth and walk the streets of this nation.
Well, let's let them give us money
They
then.
actually ought to go and in shame say, look what happened to me, to the football players, or to the chess clubs, or to my granddaughter's 5th grade class. And say, I made a terrible mistake, and we need to respect each other, and la 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 and la la la. But we can't, I don't know. They all say they won't do it again. Well, thanks, you know what lot, yeah.
So
I can't swear anymore, I've got
There's
that
no
damn
jar
killer
left.
looking for me, all right, no swear.
To your point earlier, though, that most states and localities do have human rights commissions and human rights acts, and those are what generally govern their sexual harassment laws. So checking there to make sure that there is a requirement within that does require businesses and government agencies, because we forget about government agencies, so it needs to require businesses, government agencies, and lawmakers to be trained on sexual harassment. And then you can look at then what is the accountability piece also, because we can't forget to include that language. And so as we're talking about this, those are sort of concrete next steps. I would also say in my sort of non-C3 moment that voter mobilization, not just around our local elections, not just around VAWA, but we've got to gear up for the next major administration shift, fingers crossed, because we cannot have an administration that supports these acts and then expect major shifts, right? And so that is going to really mean that all of us come out. And it's going to mean that we carry this message continuously, and that we don't just let it die off when the Me Too stuff isn't happening.
Let's don't be Anita Hill, let's be ever after, rather than if I had my moment. Ruth, you have one final word, or 3 or 7?
I'll just keep it to 2. I guess I agree. I have nothing different to say than what Karma said and what Pat's talking about, which is mobilization. And it's not just voter mobilization. What's happening for us right now in this country as women, if it ends tomorrow, we've got 4 years of backtracking to have to do to make that different. The longer that this goes without us standing up, mobilizing, and say we will not go back. I know I sound like a lecturer, but we will not go back. The more important it's going to become daily. I'm not kidding. It's just awful what's happening right now. Me Too, thank goodness. I agree with you, Pat. I wish it hadn't happened, but to some degree it's been a good thing, because it's reminded us that we're up against all of this power and privilege, and what are we going to do about it? Well, let's do something. So,
More questions?
Yes.
You call it.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I want to speak for this community. We're older than most of you. And in fact, I was 88 yesterday. And I want to tell you that I was the first federal women's program coordinator, and I wasn't allowed to sit with black women. I had a separate, I was hired because I had graduated from Stanford and I could speak well. And I was seated behind my boss's secretary because they wouldn't let me be a part of EEO. Now, I just wanted to let you know that, because in my lifetime, look at the changes. Look at what happened, because we've gone through abortion reform. That was a huge problem. And we also tried the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, which is still going on. But we have made a lot of progress, and what you're talking about now is exactly what needs to be done. But I do want to tell you that that we have done those things. So it shows us that we can do it again. Yes. And I was married to Julius Hobson, who was a minority, and was thrown out of the office because of that, and managed to survive, and we got through it all. So that there are people here who have, like Harriet and like Carmel, wonderful stories, and you too, okay, who just got back from Africa. So there are wonderful things going on, and we just have to not get depressed, which is our problem.
So what about, wait, not this lunch, but what about taping them if people wanted to talk about it?
Why don't you guys come on a panel on my studio in Anne Arundel? It's a television studio. Come in and talk.
It's not us. What I heard was...
Oh, anybody you want to bring.
No, what I heard was, we're saying, us people, I'm only 75, I bow to you.
You're young.
I have to mind her the rest of the day. What I'm saying is that on the shoulders are shoulders that meet two people. And we are not only standing there going, where were you? And we needed you 50 years ago, but we are with our arms kind of sagging. We are holding him up. And the only thing we ask of you and you is to do that then for the next generation. And so telling these stories, I didn't know that. I've known you a long time, I didn't know that story. And so the point is we've come a long way, but guess what? Me too, we've got
Come a long way, baby, but you got a long way.
I think it needs to be stories from people who aren't leaders of this or leaders of that or mothers or something. I think it needs to be people who just look like a voter and say, here's my story. There are some residents here who are not clearinghouse people. Would any of you like to share a story or an idea or a suggestion? Or you came.
They came to learn.
Not a resident, but...
Shout, you shout outside voice.
I don't have a very loud voice, but I wanted to make several points. One was that, I worked for the Women's Bureau since 1974, and she's coming with a microphone. I worked for the Women's Bureau since 1974, and Pat, there was one director of equal employment opportunity in the Labor Department who, when we were going to do a workshop on sexual harassment, this was years and years ago, and I don't remember who was head of the administration, but she did not think we should use the word sexual harassment in the name of the workshop. We couldn't even, it was too inflammatory, which of course blew my mind.
Sort of like saying breasts, you mean, or vaginas?
I don't know, I forget how we resolved it, but it just was like,
but we
she
all
was head
dealt
of
with that.
EEO, right?
Yes.
But another thing is too, in the Women's Bureau, I remember when Sinead Chun was our director, she was Korean American, and she awarded a small contract to a young Korean American woman to do research on how Korean American pastors handled when they found out about domestic violence among their parishioners, which I think was, a very, some of you were talking about, getting churches involved, so I just wanted to mention that. Another thing was that we're inundated every day now. This is so different with stories in the Washington Post, for example, the paper I read, about sexual harassment and violence against women. And today alone there were 3. And the front page article, and I'm not sure what the lesson is from that. I don't know if you all read, but it's about this young woman who claimed that this war had raped her, and she became pregnant and went to the credit of the reporters. For those of you who haven't read it, the reporters did some digging to verify what she was saying, and it turned out that she seemed to have an association with an organization that was trying to spread false claims about the media. I mean, you read about perpetrators who try to spread lies about victims, but this was, this was a front page story, and here it was, an organization, and not only an organization, but this organization apparently is considered a charitable organization, which also blew my mind. They're getting charitable donations, and they're trying to spread lies like this.
Well, it's sort of, we were talking also, one group had an intern infiltrate them and steal all their stuff, and when, here's this person coming in like, they want to paint us and show examples of people lying to I mean, Mitch McConnell paid the woman to rat out Roy Moore. That's what he said yesterday at a news conference. But he has something better to do than be the Senate Majority Leader. They want us to be hussies and whores and liars and what do you call women who are out to get money from men? No. Extortion. Gold diggers. Gold diggers. How well forgotten that. Our guys spent our life looking for a rich man and wanted to be called a gold digger. That's a lie. So what we have to be careful is, as people tell the stories, everybody who puts it even anonymously has to be prepared to hear on the news from some mostly white man how you made it up and why didn't you wait 40 years and you want to go, I almost waited till I died, because that's what most women do. Only 1 in 6 rape victims reports it. And then only 1 in 6 of the ones reported are believed or anything's done about it. So like 1 out of 12, and so there's 11 out of 12 sexual assault and rape victims wandering around trying to get their lives together. I hope they're all doing Me Too's. I hope they're all doing Me Too's.
Why is it that it takes several women for a story to be believed? I mean, that's one of the things that I thought about. One woman alone is not enough to be believed. It takes, and even when a lot of women come forward, they're still not believed.
But one man will be believed, and it's a power dynamic.
If one man walks in and said, my car's been stolen, you immediately buy him a new car, poor guy. One woman walks in and says, I've been raped, we're going, what were you wearing, why were you drinking?
What did you do? Yes.
The other thing I want to ask you, Pat, you were talking about the training, and about the efforts on the Hill to require training. Do you know of any studies that have been done to see how effective the training is? Because, as you said,
I think they have to find them or demand them, because if you train wrong, I mean, what if you trained every one of our children here to the alphabet in French? That would be bad training. So they may well be doing something similar. So I think Sheila Jackson Lee is going to be, with John Conyers having his little problem, Sheila Jackson Lee will be the new chief sponsor of the Violence Against Women Act in the House. And she said yesterday that she's going to look to adding in the Violence Against Women Act something on sexual harassment as well as sexual abuse and sexual violence. So we'll be meeting with her in a couple of days to figure out what that is. But one will be, if we do training, we'll take your advice and go and look to see what works and what doesn't. And I think electric cattle prod might be involved.
That works.
We don't permit those in Michigan.
Any more questions?
Harriet, you had a question.
Whoa! We're sorry.
Wake you up.
For a station. Do we have a new answer for why the Equal Rights Amendment is necessary? I just wondered if...
It's the same old one. Women aren't in the Constitution.
No, I'm saying to all the people who say it's not necessary. Do we have a new response? I'm sorry, I wasn't...
Right, yes. If we were in the Constitution, that discrimination on account of gender was illegal, a basic constitutional right, most of all of this is gender-based, both male and female gender-based sex discrimination, and our lawyers would get rich with the lawsuits. We'd sue the schools and we'd sue so everybody goes, oh, the statute of limitations has run out on Harvey Weinstein. Well, but the civil cause of action against him hasn't.
Right.
And but we don't have equal standing ours is called intermediate scrutiny. I can't believe I'm a junior high school social studies teacher, not a lawyer. But I just throw out intermediate scrutiny. We know what that means. You don't get the full thing.
Right.
Religion and race get strict scrutiny.
Sure.
So our new reason is the same ones. That if we were in the Constitution, there would be a cause of action, and we wouldn't have to take it to the media. The EEOC would have to work harder. Our laws in our states would have to match that Constitution, and women would have a women and men are gender-based violence, would have a constitutional right to be free of that discrimination. And we almost had a private cause of action where we could have sued them, and with the Supreme Court with William Rehnquist snickering said, oh, that's not a constitutional right, the states will have to do it.
I guess what I'm also asking is, why don't we galvanize around a new energy?
Right, we are. Certainly you have to have a program on that. I get something twice a day about it, so. And
can I just say that public access is what Trump is trying to get rid of?
Yes.
Because you don't know that it's there, it's free, I'm an access producer with 3 million viewers. So it's not just eating popcorn at night. A lot of women will be educated by what we do, and it's not costing a fortune to do that, but the access stations are being put out of the way. They're like a free platform to say what you want, you know? So I'm available for anybody.
So on our agenda of 100 things to do that passed the Equal Rights Amendment, we've got 2 states left. We got Nevada, and you know they're trying to recall the 3 senators, women in Nevada that got that passed. And then we have Virginia, and we have Florida, and we have Missouri, and we have Illinois, and we have North Carolina. We could all move there. That would scare the you-know-what out. We can all just...
Virginia.
Right. And guess what? Virginia, with our new legislature that is now 49-51 instead of 34-66, we might do it. Well, I'll give you a call. We'll get a van. We'll get a big Winnebago. We'll get horns. We'll get bullhorns. We'll shake our fists.
So what states have not passed the ERA?
I just said them. If you ask me to repeat them again, I'm
Okay.
Florida. Nevada just passed it.
Okay.
Illinois, Missouri,
Okay.
Virginia, North Carolina, Florida. There's others that haven't.
Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah, I'm only naming them like that we have some chance.
Oh, 13.
Just Google the already. But then there's a whole new let's start over. Well,
No.
well, we're trying not to use stupid. When you have grandchildren, your daughter-in-law comes up and goes, Pat, we aren't going to say stupid. We aren't going to say the F word either. And we know, Grandma, that would be really hard for you to talk to your grandchildren at all. They thought I was mute. Ill-advised. How's that?
That's good. That's good. Ill-advised. Not a smart strategy.
Anybody else? Oh my. I'm thinking about that Winnebago with all of us in it. We have a wet bar and we have a...
I know where to rent one.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, did you all see Dirty Little Lies or Nasty Little Lies?
Yeah.
That they with Nicole Kidman?
Big
Little Lies.
Big Little Lies.
Thank you. Wow, I just watched it.
Yeah.
Is it in the theaters?
No, it's
It's on TV.
No, HBO.
I got free HBO for 3 days. I watched it. It is incredible. I read the book, then I watched the series.
Yeah, I've heard
I think it's on Netflix. But if some media does something really amazing like that, let them know you love it.
Right.
Or put this on Facebook.
Is it about
you know.
empowered women or?
Well, you didn't see it, you gotta see it. So
In
if you
between
put
midnight
stuff on
shit.
Facebook, the press, the mainstream legacy media covers Facebook like it's happening because that's where everybody is. Put stuff on Facebook, put stuff on social media.
Oh, that's great.
Wow.
You post it and I'll repost it.
Okay.
And guess what, there might be people in this room,
What's the
and I
name of
know
the
one
thing?
sister whose computer broke, that don't use hashtags in Facebook, so word of mouth. We still
Well, you
have
should
to.
use Facebook. I don't get hashtags with Facebook.
Twitter. Their computers are broken. They don't have access to them.
Talking about Twitter, there's going to be a Twitter storm related to sexual assault primarily on campus and education on Monday. And let's pass some of these flyers out for those of you who can help.
What is a
tweet.
Twitter? What is a Twitter storm? Oh, it's when everybody who's got a Twitter hashtag or who can get one very quickly and easily goes on Twitter and starts talking about an issue that has its own hashtag, and then it trends, and as it trends, it becomes more popular. The more popular it becomes, it gets looked at by the people who are either the center of the Twitter storm or the ones who can do something about the action. So it's a shorthand way.
And in Violence Against Women, we have the hashtag, the Twitter accounts of every member of Congress. And so when our whole coalition that's 10, 20, 30,000 strong, and hashtag is the thing for the number, sends 140 characters. Oh, no, I don't want it to. Sends 140 characters that in some version of Shape Up, you do that or whatever. It's what Donald Trump does every morning.
Yeah.
Who asked the question? It's what he does every morning. And he has no adult supervision.
But he knows what
May
he's
I
saying.
say, being from the great state of Michigan, I sincerely, over and over again, apologize for Betsy DeVos being Secretary of Labor.
Well,
And I forthrightly and overtly lobbied against her, particularly with Senator Cassidy, who seems to be brain dead. Yeah.
Can I say something about Twitter really quick? I was at a fundraiser last night, and about 3 people got up and said that that's the best way that they know how to reach their congresspeople. Because now, MOCs are on Twitter because they need to watch what the president's doing. And there is real engagement happening. So if you yourself or you know someone, it's not just about Twitter storms, although I love Twitter storms. And I'm a Twitter person. But, you know, I talk to my congresspeople on Twitter, and I say, and there's an engagement that happens with their staff. So to whatever degree that we're in a new environment, and our president, the president, not my president, he's forced us into that realm. He truly has. So anybody that you can, or any way that you can, and you want to engage, and Twitter is what's kind of working right now.
And when this is edited this is for the YouTube channel, I then post it on all social media, which is Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all of those accounts. So once this is edited, this gets posted out to all of those accounts.
I just wanted to mention, I'm on a committee drafting a sexual harassment policy for the Metropolitan Washington Council of the AFL-CIO.
How interesting.
And I want it drafted in non-legalese so that all these guys, and they're mostly guys, understand it, you know, plain English. So if anybody has ideas or has good policies or thoughts, please get in touch with me, annfromdc@gmail.com, because I can use some help.
Carmen, you get to say one last thing, or 2 last things?
Well, I just want to say how excited I am, and really energized from today's conversation, and especially from hearing your stories about the trailblazing that you all have done, because I can't tell you what the Me Too, the hashtag Me Too has done, brought voice to all of these different stories, but also it says that we're not alone, and you guys have just really spelled out the reasons why we are where we are. We're in a time of a major culture shift, and much of that has to do with the legacy that you've already brought to the table. So I'm so appreciative of you all as well.
Oh, there we go. Absolutely.
Right.
So I'll try to be as quick as possible.
Oh, take your time.
I was the daughter of a businessman who did his business overseas, so I did a lot of traveling even before college. And when I came back, graduated from Radcliffe, I felt that this country didn't have half as much foreign experience as they needed. So I thought, gee, we've got to start a foreign program. And I did. I started working, and who heard about it but J. William Fulbright.
Whoa.
He came and said, my God, you're right. And so he helped me. And long story short, I became his wife. But he had influence in Congress, and that was the beginning of the
Fulbright Scholarship.
Yay!
Thank you.
And ours will have the endings.
I mean, do more women get Fulbrights than men?
What?
Do more women get Fulbrights than men?
You know, I don't know. I
suspect
that
not.
at the beginning, and I know there was a concert, a real effort to make it as close to 50-50 as possible, but I've lost track of numbers.
I have one last thing to say, and I'm looking, and it's not in this issue. But usually when I read Ms., I get angry and busy and whatever, but I read one issue where I just sobbed. It was a good sob. Because there was a picture of, Marge, you were there, I was home cowering in the cold weather. There was a picture of some women in their pink uterus hats, but there were 3 men with pink hats. And had their dignity about them, and I don't care if they were pleasing their mom or their girlfriend or their teacher, they had, I have a button that says courage. They had the courage. Nobody was going to say anything bad about them. There they were in their pink hats. And so I don't think we always have to have a man to help us do what we need to do. But I want to make sure if they want to be involved, that we put their sorry butts to work. Because not just us speaking out, and not just us writing the manuals, right? But we need to find them. So let's find a mayor who will do something wonderful and then give him a big award. Let's find a state senator that instead of resigning over humiliation, stands up and writes the state's training and policy manual. So we'll probably we'll be working with our Volkswassers to see if we do a separate package or a similar one and put all those ideas in.
Can I say, I got involved in gun violence prevention. And that is an excellent entree to domestic violence prevention legislation, because gun violence and domestic violence are so closely related, and it's very hard in some places to do anything about gun violence prevention. But if you do it through the avenue of domestic violence reduction, it might work. Please keep that in mind. There's lots of information about that.
One more thought. What Harriet was talking about, the international realm, it reminded me that many years ago I was the U.S. representative to an initiative on women, work, and health at the OECD in Paris.
Oh, in Paris, of course. Hardship posting, right?
Right. That was when we were allowed to travel. That's way back. But interestingly enough, one of the issues that I raised that should have been part of the discussion was sexual harassment.
Yes.
And to my surprise, the other European delegates didn't think that was a problem. It was only the Canadian delegate and myself who said, oh yes, it's a problem.
Yes. Thank you all so much. Please, if you would like to copy.